This low meat intake is silently destroying your brain right now, and by the time you notice the symptoms, the damage may already be catastrophic. As a physician who has spent over 20 years treating cognitive decline and neurological disorders in older adults, I need to warn you about the most dangerous dietary trend that is creating an epidemic of preventable brain damage in people over 60. Millions have been convinced that reducing meat consumption is the path to better health, that plant-based diets are superior, that meat causes disease and should be minimized or eliminated entirely. But in reality, every week you spend eating insufficient meat is a week of accelerating brain deterioration, of neurons dying from starvation, of cognitive function slipping away so gradually that you do not realize what is happening until you have crossed into irreversible decline. What almost no doctor will tell you, what the plant-based movement does not want you to know, is that your brain has absolute non-negotiable requirements for specific nutrients that exist only in meat, nutrients that cannot be obtained in adequate amounts from plants no matter how carefully you plan your diet or how many supplements you take. And today, I am going to reveal exactly what low meat intake does to your brain after 60, why the damage happens so quietly that most people do not notice until it is too late, and how restoring adequate meat consumption can stop the destruction and potentially reverse years of cognitive decline. Stay with me until the very end, because I have something critical to share that will completely change how you understand the relationship between meat and brain health for the rest of your life. I am Dr. Marcus Richardson, a board-certified physician specializing in geriatric cognitive health and nutritional neurology, with over 2 decades of clinical experience, watching the devastating effects of inadequate meat intake destroy the minds of otherwise healthy seniors. And today I want to warn you about a nutritional catastrophe that is being celebrated as progress, that is being promoted by influencers and celebrities and even some misguided healthcare providers, but that is causing irreparable harm to millions of older adults who deserve the truth. Let me tell you something that will shock you and probably make you angry. I have patients who are 62, 65, 70, 75 years old who come into my office proud of how little meat they eat. They tell me they have cut back to just chicken once or twice a week because someone told them red meat is dangerous. They tell me they are trying to eat mostly plant-based because they saw a documentary that scared them. They tell me they feel good about their choices, that they are doing the right thing for their health and the planet. And then they tell me about the symptoms they are experiencing, the brain fog that never lifts, the memory problems that are getting progressively worse, the difficulty finding words in the middle of sentences, the mental fatigue that makes even simple tasks feel overwhelming, the depression and anxiety that came out of nowhere, the numbness and tingling in their hands and feet. And they have no idea, absolutely no conception, that these symptoms are direct consequences of the dietary changes they are so proud of. And that moment, when I have to explain that their well-intentioned choices are destroying their brain, is one of the most difficult conversations I have as a physician. Because I am not just telling them they made a mistake. I am telling them that the nutritional advice they followed, advice from sources they trusted, has caused potentially permanent damage to the most important organ in their body. I will tell you straight, and I need you to hear this with complete clarity. Your brain after 60 requires meat, not occasionally, not in tiny amounts, not just white meat or fish. Your brain needs regular consumption of nutrient-dense red meat to maintain the cellular structures, the neurotransmitter systems, the energy production, and the protective mechanisms that keep your mind functioning. When you reduce meat intake below a critical threshold, when you try to obtain these nutrients from plants or supplements, you create deficiencies that your brain cannot compensate for. And unlike many other organs that can adapt to less than optimal nutrition, your brain has no reserves, no backup systems. When critical nutrients are missing, neurons begin to malfunction and die. Neural connections weaken and disappear. Cognitive function deteriorates. And this happens quietly, gradually over months and years until one day you realize you are not who you used to be mentally, and by then the damage is done. The devastating irony is that the people most vulnerable to this brain destruction, seniors over 60, are the exact demographic being most aggressively targeted by anti-meat messaging. Older adults are told that reducing meat will lower their cholesterol, reduce their cancer risk, improve their heart health, but nobody tells them that their aging brain has dramatically increased requirements for the nutrients found exclusively in meat. Nobody tells them that after 60, Their ability to absorb and utilize nutrients from plant sources declines sharply due to reduced stomach acid, decreased enzyme production, and age-related changes in gut function. Nobody tells them that the supplements they are taking as meat replacements are poorly absorbed and cannot provide the same benefits as whole food nutrients. Nobody tells them that within months of drastically reducing meat intake, their vitamin B12 levels will plummet, their iron stores will become depleted, their zinc status will deteriorate, their omega-3 fatty acids will drop, and their brain will begin the slow process of starvation and death. I have seen this pattern destroy hundreds of minds over my career. Intelligent, accomplished people who made dietary changes they believed were healthy, only to watch their cognitive function collapse within a few years. And the tragedy is that much of this damage is preventable. If they had known the truth, if they had understood what their brain actually needs, they would never have reduced their meat intake. But they were lied to by a system that prioritizes ideology over biology, that cares more about pushing dietary trends than protecting brain health. Today, right now, I'm going to give you the truth that can save your cognitive function and potentially save your life. I'm going to explain exactly what happens in your brain when meat intake is too low, why the damage is so quiet and insidious, and what you need to do immediately to stop the destruction and begin the process of repair. When I talk to my patients about the effects of low meat intake on brain health, I always start by explaining why the damage is so quiet, so gradual, so easy to miss until it is too late. Unlike acute injuries where you feel immediate pain or notice obvious dysfunction, nutritional brain damage happens slowly over months and years. Your brain has remarkable compensatory mechanisms that mask deficiencies in the early stages. It borrows from reserves, slows down non-essential processes, and maintains critical functions as long as possible. But underneath this apparent stability, cellular structures are deteriorating, neurons are dying, and irreversible damage is accumulating. By the time symptoms become obvious enough that you seek medical help, you have often lost years of cognitive capacity that cannot be fully recovered. Let me explain the specific mechanisms by which low meat intake destroys brain tissue in people over 60. First, vitamin B12 deficiency, which is absolutely inevitable when meat intake is insufficient. Vitamin B12 exists in bioavailable forms only in animal products. Plants do not contain B12 despite what some people claim. Nutritional yeast and fortified foods contain synthetic forms that many people cannot convert to active B12 due to genetic variations in methylation pathways. After 60, stomach acid production decreases significantly, and you need adequate stomach acid to cleave B12 from protein and absorb it. This means that even if you eat small amounts of meat, you may not be absorbing adequate B12. When B12 becomes deficient, a cascade of neurological destruction begins. First, myelin synthesis stops. Myelin is the fatty insulating sheath around nerve fibers that allows rapid signal transmission. Without adequate B12, your body cannot produce myelin. Existing myelin begins to break down, a process called demyelination. This is the same process that occurs in multiple sclerosis, except it is happening throughout your entire nervous system. Nerve signals become slower and weaker. You experience this as mental sluggishness, poor memory, difficulty concentrating, and eventually numbness and tingling in your extremities as peripheral nerves are damaged. Second, homocysteine levels rise dramatically. Homocysteine is a toxic amino acid that accumulates when B vitamins are deficient. Elevated homocysteine directly damages blood vessel walls throughout your body, especially the delicate capillaries in your brain. This vascular damage reduces blood flow to brain tissue, creating chronic hypoxia, where neurons do not receive adequate oxygen. Over time, this leads to vascular dementia, a form of cognitive decline caused by impaired blood flow. Third, DNA synthesis in rapidly dividing cells becomes impaired. While most brain cells do not divide frequently, the neural stem cells that generate new neurons in the hippocampus absolutely require B12 for cell division. When B12 is deficient, neurogenesis stops. Your brain can no longer replace damaged neurons or form new ones. The hippocampus, your memory center, begins to atrophy. Recent research shows that people with low B12 levels have significantly smaller brain volumes and worse memory performance. The brain is literally shrinking from lack of this critical nutrient. Second mechanism of destruction is iron deficiency. After 60, Iron deficiency becomes extremely common, especially in people who have reduced red meat intake. Iron from plant sources, called non-heme iron, is absorbed at only 5 to 10% efficiency and is further inhibited by phytates, tannins, and calcium commonly found in plant-based diets. The heme iron in red meat is absorbed at 80 to 90% efficiency. When iron becomes deficient, several catastrophic processes occur in your brain. First, hemoglobin production drops. Hemoglobin carries oxygen to every cell in your body. Your brain uses 20% of your oxygen, despite being only 2% of your body weight. When hemoglobin is inadequate, your brain becomes chronically oxygen deprived. Neurons cannot produce adequate ATP, the energy molecule that powers all cellular processes. Without sufficient energy, neurons cannot maintain ion gradients, cannot fire properly, cannot synthesize neurotransmitters, cannot repair damage. They enter a state of chronic dysfunction that you experience as overwhelming brain fog and mental fatigue. Second, iron is required for the synthesis of neurotransmitters including dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. The enzymes that produce these critical brain chemicals are iron-dependent. When iron is deficient, neurotransmitter production plummets. You experience this as depression, anxiety, poor motivation, inability to focus, and severe cognitive impairment. Third, iron is essential for myelin production, working synergistically with B12. Iron deficiency accelerates the demyelination process, compounding the neurological damage. Third mechanism is zinc deficiency. Zinc is required for over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, many of which are critical for brain function. Zinc from plant sources is poorly absorbed due to phytate binding. The zinc in red meat is highly bioavailable and easily absorbed. When zinc becomes deficient, several processes fail. First, neurotransmitter synthesis is impaired because zinc is a cofactor for enzymes that produce dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. Second, antioxidant defenses collapse because zinc is required for the function of superoxide dismutase and other antioxidant enzymes that protect neurons from oxidative damage. Third, synaptic plasticity is lost because zinc modulates NMDA receptors that are essential for learning and memory formation. Fourth, neurogenesis stops because zinc is required for neural stem cell division and differentiation. Let me tell you about Margaret, a 67-year-old retired professor who came to my office after 2 years of following a mostly plant-based diet. She had reduced her meat intake to just fish once or twice per week because her daughter convinced her it was healthier. Over those 2 years, she noticed progressive cognitive decline. She could not remember the names of her graduate students. She struggled to follow complex arguments in academic papers she used to read easily. She experienced crushing fatigue and brain fog every afternoon. She became depressed and anxious for the first time in her life. She developed numbness in her feet that her primary care doctor dismissed as normal aging. When I ran comprehensive blood work, the devastation was obvious. Her vitamin B12 was 185 picograms per milliliter, severely deficient. Her ferritin was 15 nanograms per milliliter, indicating depleted iron stores. Her zinc was in the bottom 5th percentile. Her homocysteine was elevated at 18 micromoles per liter, indicating severe functional B vitamin deficiency and vascular damage. Her brain MRI showed early signs of atrophy and white matter changes consistent with vascular damage. At 67, her brain looked like that of someone in their late 70s or early 80s. 2 years of inadequate meat intake had caused damage that would take years to partially reverse, and that would never fully heal. Are you currently eating less meat than you did 5 or 10 years ago because you believed it was healthier? Have you noticed changes in your memory, focus, or mental energy? Drop a comment below and tell me about your experience, because understanding how common this problem is will help you realize you are not alone. Now let me explain exactly why meat is non-negotiable for brain health after 60, focusing on the specific nutrients that exist exclusively or primarily in animal products and that your aging brain absolutely requires. This is not about protein. Although adequate protein is important, this is about micronutrients, fatty acids, and bioactive compounds that plants simply do not provide in forms or quantities that your body can use effectively. Understanding this will help you see through the misinformation that has convinced millions of people to reduce their meat intake to dangerously low levels. First, vitamin B12 in its bioavailable forms. I have mentioned this already, but I need to emphasize how critical this is. Vitamin B12 does not exist in plants. The B12 listed on nutritional labels of plant foods comes from bacterial contamination, fortification with synthetic forms, or nutritional yeast grown on B12-enriched media. Your body needs B12 in the forms of methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin to function properly. These active forms are found exclusively in animal products, with the highest concentrations in red meat, especially organ meats like liver. The synthetic cyanocobalamin found in supplements and fortified foods must be converted to active forms through multiple enzymatic steps that require genetic factors many people lack. Additionally, approximately 40% of people have MTHFR gene variations that impair their ability to methylate and activate synthetic B12. These people can take massive doses of supplements and still remain deficient because they cannot convert it to usable forms. But when they eat meat, they get preformed active B12 that their body can use immediately. Second, hemi-iron, the form of iron bound to hemoglobin and myoglobin in animal muscle tissue. Hemi-iron is absorbed at 80 to 90% efficiency regardless of what else you eat with it. Non-heme iron from plants is absorbed at only 5 to 10% efficiency and is dramatically inhibited by phytates in grains and legumes, polyphenols in tea and coffee, and calcium from dairy or supplements. After 60, iron absorption decreases further due to reduced stomach acid and changes in intestinal function. This means that even if you consume adequate iron from plant sources on paper, you are absorbing only a tiny fraction, and you become deficient over time. The iron in red meat is the only reliable way to maintain adequate iron status in older adults, especially women who have spent decades losing iron through menstruation and may enter their 60s with depleted reserves. Third, preformed DHA and EPA, the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that make up a substantial portion of your brain tissue. Plant foods contain ALA, a short-chain omega-3 found in flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Your body can theoretically convert ALA to DHA and EPA, but the conversion rate is abysmal, typically less than 5% and often less than 1% in older adults. Genetic factors, age, sex, and overall health status all affect conversion efficiency. Women convert slightly better than men due to estrogen, but after menopause this advantage disappears. The only reliable sources of preformed DHA and EPA are fatty fish and meat from grass-fed ruminant animals. While fish contains more omega-3s than meat, many older adults do not eat fish regularly due to cost, availability, taste preferences, or concerns about mercury and other contaminants. Grass-fed beef and lamb provide meaningful amounts of DHA and EPA along with all the other brain-critical nutrients, making them superior choices for comprehensive brain nutrition. Fourth, complete protein with all essential amino acids in optimal ratios and high bioavailability. Your brain needs amino acids to synthesize neurotransmitters. Tryptophan is converted to serotonin. Tyrosine is converted to dopamine and norepinephrine. Glutamine is converted to glutamate and GABA. Plant proteins are incomplete, meaning they lack adequate amounts of one or more essential amino acids. While you can theoretically combine different plant proteins to get a complete profile, this requires careful planning and large volumes of food that many older adults cannot or will not eat. Additionally, plant proteins have lower bioavailability due to anti-nutrients that inhibit digestion and absorption. The Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score, or PDCAAS, for beef, is 100%, meaning it is completely utilized by your body. The PDCAAS for most plant proteins ranges from 50 to 75%, meaning a significant portion is not absorbed or used. Fifth, carnosine and anserine, dipeptide molecules found exclusively in animal muscle tissue, especially in red meat. These compounds have remarkable neuroprotective properties. They act as antioxidants, neutralizing reactive oxygen species that damage neurons. They prevent the formation of advanced glycation end products, toxic compounds that accumulate in aging brains and contribute to Alzheimer's disease. They enhance mitochondrial function, improving energy production in brain cells. They have been shown in research studies to improve memory, attention, and processing speed in older adults. You cannot get these compounds from plant foods. You cannot synthesize them adequately in your body after 60 due to declining enzyme activity. The only way to maintain therapeutic levels is through regular consumption of red meat. Sixth, creatine, a compound that enhances cellular energy production and has direct cognitive benefits. While your body can synthesize some creatine from amino acids, production declines with age and is insufficient to meet your brain's needs. Creatine is found exclusively in animal muscle tissue, with the highest concentrations in red meat. Research shows that creatine supplementation, and even more effectively creatine from food, improves memory, processing speed, and mental fatigue resistance in older adults. Vegetarians and people who eat low amounts of meat have significantly lower creatine levels in their brain tissue and worse cognitive performance on certain tasks. Seventh, taurine, an amino acid-like compound that supports neurological function, regulates calcium homeostasis in neurons, acts as an antioxidant, and modulates neurotransmitter activity. Taurine is found almost exclusively in animal products, particularly in meat and seafood. While your body can synthesize small amounts from cysteine and methionine, production is limited and declines with age. Low taurine levels have been associated with accelerated aging and cognitive decline. The taurine in red meat helps protect your brain from age-related degeneration. Let me tell you about Thomas, a 71-year-old man who had been following a pescatarian diet, eating only fish and plant foods, for over 5 years. He came to my office experiencing severe depression, crushing fatigue, and memory problems that were terrifying him. Despite eating what he thought was a healthy diet with fish 3 times per week and plenty of vegetables and whole grains, his nutritional status was catastrophic. His B12 was deficient. His iron was critically low. His omega-3 index showed adequate EPA and DHA from fish, but he was still cognitively impaired because he was missing all the other nutrients found in red meat. I recommended he add grass-fed beef to his diet 4 times per week. Within 6 weeks, his depression began to lift. Within 3 months, his energy returned and his memory improved dramatically. The fish alone was not enough. His brain needed the complete nutritional package that only red meat provides. Before we continue, I want to ask you something important. Have you been told that you can get all necessary nutrients from plants or that meat is unnecessary for health? Comment below and share what you have been told, because exposing these dangerous myths is critical to protecting your brain. When I explain to patients why low meat intake is especially devastating after 60, I focus on what I call the perfect storm, a convergence of age-related changes that dramatically increase your nutritional requirements while simultaneously decreasing your ability to obtain and utilize nutrients from food. This perfect storm means that dietary choices that might have been marginally adequate in your 40s or 50s become catastrophically insufficient in your 60s and beyond. Understanding this helps explain why so many people experience rapid cognitive decline shortly after reducing their meat intake in later life. The first component of this perfect storm is decreased stomach acid production, a nearly universal change that occurs with aging. Stomach acid, or hydrochloric acid, is essential for multiple aspects of nutrient absorption. It activates pepsin, the enzyme that breaks down protein into amino acids. It cleaves vitamin B12 from the proteins it is bound to in food, allowing it to be absorbed. It creates the acidic environment necessary for optimal absorption of iron, zinc, calcium, and other minerals. After 60, stomach acid production drops significantly in most people. This condition, called hypochlorhydria, means that even if you eat nutrient-rich foods, you absorb only a fraction of the nutrients they contain. The problem is compounded if you take proton pump inhibitors or other acid-reducing medications, which millions of older adults do for reflux or ulcers. These medications essentially guarantee severe nutritional deficiencies over time. The second component is decreased production of intrinsic factor, a protein secreted by cells in your stomach lining that is absolutely required for vitamin B12 absorption. Without intrinsic factor, B12 cannot be absorbed in your small intestine no matter how much you consume. Intrinsic factor production declines with age and can be completely lost due to autoimmune conditions, chronic inflammation, or long-term use of acid-reducing medications. When intrinsic factor is insufficient, you develop pernicious anemia, a form of B12 deficiency that causes severe neurological damage. The only treatment is high-dose B12 injections or sublingual supplements that bypass the digestive system. This means that oral B12 from fortified plant foods or standard supplements is completely useless for a significant percentage of older adults. The third component is decreased enzyme production throughout your digestive system. Your pancreas produces enzymes that break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Your small intestine produces enzymes that complete digestion and facilitate absorption. After 60, production of all these enzymes declines. This means that even if you eat adequate food, you cannot fully digest and absorb it. Complex plant proteins that require extensive enzymatic breakdown become even more poorly utilized. The nutrients in meat, which are more bioavailable to begin with, become even more important because they require less enzymatic processing to be absorbed. The fourth component is changes in gut microbiome composition that occur with aging. Your gut bacteria play critical roles in nutrient absorption, vitamin synthesis, and protection of the intestinal lining. With age, the diversity and health of gut bacteria decline, a condition called dysbiosis. Beneficial species decrease while pathogenic species increase. This impairs nutrient absorption, increases intestinal inflammation, and can damage the intestinal lining, leading to leaky gut syndrome, where the barrier function is compromised. These changes make it even more difficult to obtain adequate nutrition from food, especially from plant sources which require healthy gut bacteria to break down fiber and release nutrients. The fifth component is increased nutritional requirements for tissue maintenance and repair. As you age, your body requires more nutrients to maintain the same level of function. Collagen synthesis requires more vitamin C and amino acids. Bone maintenance requires more calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K. Muscle preservation requires more protein and leucine, an amino acid abundant in meat. Brain function requires more B vitamins, antioxidants, and DHA. Your needs increase at exactly the time when your ability to meet those needs from food decreases. This creates a widening gap that results in progressive deficiency and dysfunction. The sixth component is decreased conversion efficiency for nutrients that require metabolic transformation. I mentioned earlier that ALA from plants must be converted to DHA and EPA, and that this conversion is extremely inefficient in older adults. The same is true for beta-carotene conversion to active vitamin A, a process that declines sharply with age and that many people cannot perform effectively due to genetic variations. It is true for the conversion of synthetic folic acid to active folate. It is true for the activation of vitamin D in the liver and kidneys. All of these conversion processes become less efficient after 60, meaning you need preformed active nutrients from animal sources rather than precursors from plant sources. The seventh component is medication use, which is nearly universal in older adults and which dramatically affects nutritional status. Metformin, used by millions for diabetes, depletes vitamin B12. Statins deplete coenzyme Q10. Proton pump inhibitors deplete B12, magnesium, calcium, and iron. Diuretics deplete potassium, magnesium, and zinc. Many older adults take 5, 10, or even 15 medications daily, each one potentially causing nutritional deficiencies that compound the deficiencies from inadequate diet. Let me tell you about Patricia, a 69-year-old woman who came to my office experiencing severe peripheral neuropathy, pain, numbness, and tingling in her hands and feet that had progressively worsened over 3 years. She had reduced her red meat intake to almost nothing, after her cardiologist told her it would help her cholesterol. She took a proton pump inhibitor daily for reflux. She was on metformin for prediabetes. The combination of low meat intake and medications that deplete B12 created a catastrophic deficiency. Her B12 level was undetectable, less than 100 picograms per milliliter. Her homocysteine was extremely elevated at 23 micromoles per liter. Her nerve conduction studies showed severe peripheral nerve damage. I started her on high-dose B12 injections and insisted she resume eating red meat at least 4 times per week. Within 2 months, her symptoms began to improve. Within 6 months, the neuropathy had largely resolved. But she will always have some residual nerve damage because the deficiency went untreated for so long. If she had known the truth about her brain's requirements for meat, if her doctors had monitored her nutritional status, this damage could have been completely prevented. Remember, At the very beginning, I promised you something critical that would completely change how you understand the relationship between meat and brain health. Here it is, and this truth could save your cognitive function and possibly your life. The gift is this understanding. The anti-meat narrative that has dominated nutrition advice for the past several decades is not based on solid science. It is based on flawed observational studies that confound meat consumption with other unhealthy behaviors, on ideological positions masquerading as health advice, and on financial interests that profit from plant-based products and medications to treat the deficiency diseases that result from inadequate meat intake. The truth, supported by evolutionary biology, biochemistry, and clinical observation, is that human brains require meat, not occasionally, not in minimal amounts, regularly, consistently, in quantities sufficient to prevent deficiency of the critical nutrients that exist primarily or exclusively in animal products. This changes everything because it means you have been lied to. You have been told that reducing meat intake will improve your health when the opposite is true for brain function. You have been told that plant-based diets are optimal when they create deficiencies that destroy cognitive function in older adults. You have been told that supplements can replace meat when the bioavailability and completeness of whole food nutrition cannot be replicated by isolated synthetic compounds. Every day you have spent eating insufficient meat because you believed the lies has been a day of neurological damage. But today, right now, you can stop that damage and begin the process of repair. Now let me give you the exact protocol to immediately stop the brain destruction caused by low meat intake and begin restoring your cognitive function. First, commit to eating red meat at minimum 4 to 5 times per week, with each serving being 4 to 6 ounces of cooked meat. This is not negotiable. This is the minimum threshold to prevent deficiency and support brain health in adults over 60. Choose nutrient-dense cuts including ground beef with at least 20% fat, ribeye, chuck roast, short ribs, and lamb. Include organ meats like beef liver at least once per week if possible, as liver contains the highest concentrations of brain-critical nutrients. Choose grass-fed meat when available and affordable, but do not let perfect be the enemy of good. Conventional meat is infinitely better than inadequate meat intake. Second, if you have been eating low amounts of meat for months or years, you likely have severe nutritional deficiencies that need immediate correction. Schedule comprehensive blood work with your physician, including complete blood count, vitamin B12, methylmalonic acid, which is a more sensitive marker of B12 deficiency, homocysteine, ferritin, serum iron, total iron binding capacity, zinc, vitamin D, and a complete metabolic panel. These tests will reveal the extent of damage and allow you to monitor improvement. If your B12 is below 400 picograms per milliliter, you need supplementation in addition to dietary changes. Sublingual methylcobalamin at 1,000 to 5,000 micrograms daily or weekly, B12 injections administered by your doctor, will rapidly correct deficiency. If your ferritin is below 75 nanograms per milliliter for men or 50 for women, you need iron supplementation with a highly absorbable form like ferrous bisglycinate, typically 25 to 50 milligrams daily with vitamin C to enhance absorption. Third, eliminate or dramatically reduce the plant foods that inhibit nutrient absorption. This includes grains and legumes high in phytates, excessive fiber that binds minerals, and large amounts of tea or coffee with meals which inhibit iron absorption. You do not need to eliminate these foods entirely, but they should not be the foundation of your diet. Your diet should be built on nutrient-dense animal products including red meat, fatty fish, eggs, and full-fat dairy if tolerated, with vegetables and fruits as complementary additions that provide additional vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Fourth, if you take medications that deplete nutrients, particularly proton pump inhibitors, metformin, or statins, discuss with your physician whether you truly need them or whether there are alternatives that do not cause nutritional deficiencies. If you must continue these medications, you need even higher intake of the nutrients they deplete. Proton pump inhibitors should be used for the shortest duration possible, ideally no more than 8 weeks, not the years or decades that many people take them. If you have reflux, addressing root causes including food intolerances, stress, and eating patterns is more effective than long-term acid suppression that guarantees nutritional deficiency. Fifth, combine increased meat intake with other brain-supporting practices. Engage in regular aerobic exercise which increases blood flow to the brain, and supports neurogenesis. Prioritize sleep quality and duration, aiming for 7 to 9 hours per night in a dark, cool, quiet environment. Sleep is when your brain clears metabolic waste and consolidates memories. Manage stress through meditation, time in nature, or other practices that calm your nervous system. Challenge your brain with novel learning, reading, puzzles, or meaningful social engagement. Stay mentally active to create demand for neural function. Sixth, track your cognitive function objectively so you can observe improvements. Use simple memory tests available online to establish a baseline, then retest monthly. Keep a journal noting your mental clarity, energy levels, mood, and any neurological symptoms like numbness or tingling. Most people notice improvements within 2 to 4 weeks of restoring adequate meat intake, with dramatic changes by 2 to 3 months, as nutritional status normalizes and damaged tissues begin to repair. Now I must provide critical medical guidance. If you have been eating very low amounts of meat for extended periods and have severe deficiencies, the reintroduction process should be gradual and medically supervised. Rapid correction of severe B12 deficiency can occasionally cause temporary worsening of neurological symptoms as damaged nerves begin to regenerate. If you have kidney disease, discuss protein intake with your nephrologist, as high-protein diets may need modification. If you have gout, gradual increase in meat intake with adequate hydration is usually well tolerated, but medical monitoring is appropriate. The power to stop the quiet destruction of your brain, to reverse years of nutritional damage, and to protect your cognitive function for decades to come is in your hands right now. You do not need to accept the lies about meat being dangerous. You do not need to follow dietary trends that destroy brain health. You do not need to become another statistic in the epidemic of preventable cognitive decline. Eat adequate red meat starting today, 4 to 5 times per week minimum. Nutrient-dense cuts with adequate fat. Combine it with proper supplementation if deficient, with other brain-supporting practices, and with regular monitoring of your progress. Give your brain what it actually needs instead of what ideology says you should eat. And watch as your mental clarity returns, as your energy improves, as your memory sharpens, as the fog lifts and you reclaim the cognitive function you thought was slipping away forever. Your brain is counting on you to make the right choice. Choose meat, choose brain health, choose life.